Look at this dinosaur. Isn't it fantastic? So you can stroke it and it goes blue. You stroke it and it goes pink. Isn't it fantastic? And have you heard that you can get these trainers now, that you can do it with your phone? Nike brought out these self-tying trainers. And at I think it was the Fashion Week in Paris last week, they've got a new handbag that is so small, it's that long, you can't fit anything in it. But you can wear it on your hands. You can trot around with this little handbag hanging off your finger. And you can even get suitcases that charge your phone for you. It's really cool. And the thing is, this is consumerism. It's all about new, cool things, like this extraordinary dinosaur. So I want to talk to you about consumerism and God, because I think we're all in danger of getting a bit hooked on consumerism. And certainly that's society's concern at the moment, that we're all being so sucked in to this narrative, and it's being fueled by social media that is making us all quite unwell. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what we might do about that. So I thought I might start by unpacking how consumerism works. So I've said it's about novelty, it's about the latest cool thing. So it's not actually in capitalism's interest for anything to last for too long, because they wouldn't make any money if you only had one phone for your whole life or one pair of jeans. So it's very important for the wheels of capitalism to work that we have consumerism being the software that runs on the hardware to make you keep yearning for cool new things. Because the second you've got it, it's old. I mean, that's so old. This dinosaur's old now, I'm sorry. Everyone's got a dinosaur. And then, of course, you look around and you see all these other people with dinosaurs, and then you see another new thing. You think, oh, excellent. Now, the problem is that we imagine that if we just keep getting the best new thing, which is ever more beautifully marketed, and we see all these really cool, fantastic, woke people doing all this stuff, and we think, I will be finally cool when I get the dinosaur. And so we keep yearning. And the theologian Peter Sedgwick is really brilliant about this. He says if you unpack all of that, and if you start looking at the heart of consumerism, it is all about our search for self-identity. The second Adam and Eve hid in the garden and started clothing themselves with fig leaves or whatever it was, consumerism was born, because we started attiring ourselves with messaging in order to show who we were, who we belonged to, who we wanted to be. And we haven't grown out of that yet. And I think a lot of the narrative at the moment, anti-consumerism, is a message that that's very naughty and we must stop it immediately. It's very sinful. Give it up for Lent. And actually, that's not very helpful. And I want to read you something from the mystic Thomas Traherne, because he says desire is really normal. As soon as God made us, he created a distance between us and him, and of course we are yearning to go home. It is of the nobility of man's soul that he is insatiable, for he hath a benefactor so prone to give, that he delighteth in us for asking. Do not your inclinations tell you that the world is yours? Do you not covet it all? And I think, if you read your Rowan Williams, he says we've got to just grow up now. We've got to stop imagining that there'll be an end to desire, that some fantastic day will be done. There's not a kind of gap that if we buy our Nike trainers or our sequin dinosaur, we will be finally complete. So we've got to stop trying to wish for an end to desire and come to terms with desire as a fact of our being. So when you start thinking of it like that, you notice it's not that desire is bad, wrong, or sinful. It's just that our tractor beams are off, because we have started being weaned away from God onto mammon. So what do we do about that then? How do we make sure we're muscular enough spiritually to be able to wean ourselves back onto God and make sure that our desire is focused on God and not on mammon? So to help us with that, I want to talk to you a little bit about virtue ethics and a little bit about salt. And then I want to talk to you about your bank statements. So let me start with virtue ethics. This is a sort of defensive maneuver because we need to be ready for this. We need to sort of prime ourselves to be able to withstand the incredible technology that is consumerism these days. So let me go back to dead white bloke, Aristotle. Do you know, it says on this book, probably the greatest teacher who ever lived. Anyway, I'm on safe ground here. This is from his Nicomachean Ethics. This is advice on how to be virtuous. The craftsman, I'm sorry it's not in the Greek, by the way. The craftsman has to learn how to make things, but he learns in the process of making them. So men become builders by building, harp players by playing the harp, and by a similar process, we become just by performing just actions, temperate by performing temperate actions, and brave by performing brave actions. So, first thing to ask you is, regardless of what you're doing for Lent, could you also take up a virtue workout? If you were going to do a bit of an audit of your virtues, are there some that are a bit flabby that you could take down the gym this Lent? And start thinking about, are there some habits of virtue, habits of the heart, like doing without, like enoughness, like making do, mending, reuse, recycling, all those things where you have to walk the long way to the local shop rather than nipping to the supermarket right beside the station on your way home. Those kinds of habits of the heart. What are some of those things you could do to limber up, to be able to be better set to resist the wiles of consumerism? So let me talk to you about how we might do that and why I think it's worth having a go. So I promised you some salt. What did Jesus say about salt? He talked about salt and light. Makes me think of chips, doesn't it? Sorry I didn't bring any chips. Probably a bit peckish this time of night. And I want to talk to you about game theory and salt, because the game theorists would be totally with Jesus on this. God's quite relieved about that, I'm sure you would agree. Which is that, I don't know how much you know about game theory, but it's a branch of mathematics that is particularly interested in how do we boil down to the essentials, those interactions between people who may be particularly in competition with each other or certainly in relationship with each other. And are there some kind of key strategies or ways to play those games that would give you advantage? And the modelling that comes out of it is used to understand things like Brexit, all kinds of scenarios where you're needing to try and get agreement between parties or to decide who's going to win and who's going to lose. And in order to try and understand how games work in that environment, there was a massive competition that's written up in Robert Axelrod's book, The Evolution of Cooperation, where they decided to play a set of games off against each other. And they had grandmasters from the chess world, they had mathematicians, they had philosophers and theologians, they had artists, they had rugby coaches, they had everyone they could think of propose games they thought would prevail in a standard gaming context. And they put them into a sort of computer bear pit with each other to see who would prosper, who would win. And what was really interesting is, of course, a lot of people assumed that if you're talking about competition, you get your Machiavelli off the shelf and you try and just screw everyone else over, don't you? And so quite a lot of the games were about that, just trying to sort of pull a bit of a fast one. But there were some games that were studiously nice. There was a famous one called tit for tat, which is that you generally start being nice to everyone. If they're a horror, you punish them once and then you go back to being nice. And what they found, when all they played these games together, the nice ones won, which was very cheering. And more precisely, they found that if they kept playing these games in the community, the nice ones saw the nasty ones off, because the nasty ones ruined the necessary conditions to be able to play the game in the first place. And they found this really interesting thing about clustering, that if the good games hung out with their mates in clusters, and even 5% of their interactions with each other were nice, they would convert the entire thing over time. So that's your salt. We just need to be quite bossy with ourselves about keeping it up, and we need to encourage each other. And then we can change the world. So let me give you a particular way that you personally can set about reforming consumerism through salt and light. Have you all brought your bank statements? Here's mine. I have red, amber, greened it. What I'd like you to do is have this on your conscience next time yours pops into your inbox or onto the mat. I want you to fish it out, rush down to your local church and show it to the vicar immediately. Because this is a bit like your report card for St. Peter, isn't it? I mean, if you really want to know are you a good economic citizen, how would he find out? This you cannot hide from. It tells him everywhere you've been and what you've been doing. So let's hope this is all green. You can see mine isn't quite there yet. I've been trying for quite some time, so it should be a little bit more green than it is. I do apologise. So this is some recent transactions of mine from December to the end of January. I've given myself some greens for a company in St Andrews called M&Co because it's employee-owned, and they have signed up to the Ethical Trading Initiative. I've given myself some greens for cash because quite a lot of local companies have to pay extra charges for banking and things like that, so using cash in local shops is a good idea. I've given myself greens for all the charity shops that I go to, and charitable giving and things like that. Ooh, Fisher & Donaldson, they're a rather brilliant St Andrews confectionery outfit. They now have, by royal appointment because of Wills and Kate, fantastic. Co-op, jolly good. That one's employee-owned as well. But then I've given myself some ambers because of PayPal. Now, PayPal is terribly handy, isn't it? And it also enables a whole load of people to get into the market who wouldn't be able to afford the infrastructure of shops and all that kind of thing. But they're naughty about their tax, aren't they? So I have to be a bit careful about that. I've given myself a red for Tesco, because that's laziness, really, isn't it? And while Tesco do some amazing things, there are some really interesting things about the economics of local shopping. So a quick detour into local shopping, just to encourage you to do that more. The New Economics Foundation had this really interesting thought, which is they wanted to know what happens when you spend your money. They wanted to know if you spend that pound, where does it go? So they had this idea of blue hands. They thought maybe you'd all been to Messy Church and you had a load of blue paint on your hands. And they wondered how blue you could get your pound before it would sort of be done. So they took a pound and they figured out that if you took it down to Tesco or another chain like that, it would only be worth 36p to the local economy because it would go straight into, headquarters or offshore or wherever it's going to go. It doesn't sort of stop, it just goes straight to the bank. So that's a pound converting down to 36p. What they found, though, is if that pound went shopping locally, you nip into the flower shop to buy yourself a carnation for your buttonhole, give them a pound. They go, thank you very much, sir. And then they think, is that time? Better get a coffee. So they nip down to the little cafe on the corner, give their pound over for the coffee. Thank you very much, sir. And that person goes, I keep meaning to get my hair cut. So they nip down to the barber's, give them the pound. And they think, we've run out of milk again. So they go to the wee shop to get some milk for the tea. And that person in the shop goes, I need to get some stamps to send Granny a birthday card. So they pop to the post office. The post office pays it out to an OAP, who goes to the coffee shop to have a chat with their mates. And the pound keeps whizzing around. And they found that becomes worth £1.76 for that community. So their work is now encouraging local authorities to buy locally in order to start leveraging up spend and circulation in economies. But equally, that's a really interesting thought for all of us, is how can we vote our money so that it's a vote for community, it's a vote for the kinds of enterprises that we approve of, so that every single thing on your bank statement is a vote for God and not for mammon. So that's my challenge to you about your bank statement, is how many of those reds could you turn to amber, and how many of those ambers could you turn to green? Because the thing about all of this is that we have hope. We know that salt will work. We know that we can do it one transaction at a time. We know from Aristotle that if we keep it up, we will learn virtuous muscles. If we walk in the way of the Lord, we know from neuroscience that you literally remap your brain if you change your behavior. So actually it is as simple as changing your spending. And we know that we're not going to forget desire or stop desiring anytime soon. So what we need to do when we see these beloved dinosaurs is just think, a dinosaur's enough for me. God made me to yearn for something much better than sequin dinosaurs.